May the words of my mouth and the thoughts of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God. Amen. It's good to be here. When you're used to being here and then you're not here, I miss it. If you travel over to Israel, you're going to see the many constructions of King Herod. This is really the first King Herod. This man ruled Palestine from about 40 BC, 40 years before Jesus, to just about the time of Jesus' birth, sometime in there. And this Herod was an architect and a builder. He loved to construct these big, grand structures. So, south of Jerusalem, you go down about 25 miles on this one kind of big hill. He built a big fortress called the Herodium. Named it after himself, I guess. Then you go east of Jerusalem, over to the Sea of Galilee. Not the Sea of Galilee, over to the Dead Sea. And looking down on the Dead Sea is a mountaintop. And he built a fortress up there called the Masada. And there's some movies about that one. Then you go northwest of Jerusalem, about 40 miles out to the Mediterranean Sea, and he built a seaport. And that one's called Caesarea. And then finally we come to what we're talking about today. His last big construction was the temple in Jerusalem. So yeah, he liked everything big and huge. And of course, we have the gospel lesson. The disciples are looking at this big, huge temple. And they go, wow. And they should have gone, wow. The Temple Mount is about 1,500 feet long by 900 feet wide. It's huge. And this Temple Mount is, of course, a holy place for Christians and Jews and Muslims. And it's really the center of controversy so many times. But you could take all the property here of Trinity and put it in one corner of the Temple Mount. It would kind of get lost there. So therefore, when Jesus' disciples, look up at these big buildings and these big stones, and they go, wow. And they're admiring an architectural treasure that was there. And it's the holy site of the Jewish religion. It was impressive. And so they say, teacher, what large stones. Oh, and what beautiful buildings. They're overwhelmed. Jesus, not impressed at all. No, Jesus was not impressed with the grand buildings. Jesus knew that the awesome stones were exactly that. Stones, just big hunks of rock. Jesus wanted his disciples to focus on Jesus because he was the keystone. He was the cornerstone on which they were to build. He was the one that they should not stray away from. And so Jesus says, abide in me. Now, in saying that, Jesus is no Lego block. No, not that. Rather, let's think of 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 11. For no one can lay any other foundation than the one that has been laid. The foundation is Jesus Christ. That's a great verse. No other foundation but Jesus. So now the question comes to us. We're his disciples. What impresses us? What do you just go, wow, that's impressive. Well, is it large buildings? Or great cathedrals, and you go in and you go, whoa, look at this building. Or maybe, how about big bridges? You see the Golden Gate and you go, wow. I always like on television when you have these video clips and they're taking down some old building or some old bridge, and then they take explosive charges and they put it at certain points on the structure, and then you get 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and thousands of people have come to see this, and boom, and the whole thing just collapses into a pile of dust. Everybody watches those, and of course on television they run those clips again and again and again. So I think this is where Jesus is going with his statement to his disciples that not one stone will be left upon another. Total destruction. Because when we see a large building collapse, or maybe a big bridge, it really means the destruction of an icon of our society. You know, it's something we've been looking at for a long time. And part of our sinful self loves to see the high and the mighty come down to earth with the rest of us. Something just collapses and we go, yeah. I was thinking when Jimmy DeMora of Cleveland went to prison, we all said, yeah, lock him up. But the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem meant a huge, painful change for Jerusalem. Tens of thousands of people were killed and 10,000s more were exiled out of the city. They became immigrants. This is all big change for Jerusalem. I was thinking about us and big change. How about here at Trinity? Likewise, you know, we're going through some big changes, big stuff. Yeah, we have new pastors, new directions, new relationships, and now we're talking about the future, how we're going to shape the future of the church. So the old way of doing things, well, we don't want to give it up. We like what we have. We like the familiar and the known. And of course, it's not just Trinity that's changing. The Protestant mainline church is in a precipitous decline. And there were church body leaders who led us not faithfully. Yeah, we were led in the wrong direction. I think similarly, Jesus' disciples, you know, they liked the beautiful temple. I'm sure they liked that beautiful temple. It had to be awesome. And they liked to go there to pray. And they probably had friends there, you know, scribes, Pharisees, and many others. I mean, just to go into a place like that. I can tell you personally, we were in Jerusalem in the old city, and it is a powerful experience just walking around there. But Jesus wanted to arm his disciples for the future, for their future. He knew that the devil would come and attempt to lead them astray. Jesus knew the Roman armies would come and destroy the city and the temple. Jesus knew that things weren't going to be the same. And he said, disciples, I don't want you to be alarmed by all these great big claims or these bombastic threats. He said, many are going to come in my name, as our gospel lesson said. Many are going to come in my name and make false claims about themselves. Jesus kept his disciples with him for 3 years. He really wanted them right there with him so they understood who he was, who Jesus was, and why his kingdom was not of this world. Jesus' kingdom was not a kingdom of large temples or grand buildings. No, Jesus was in the city with them, and he wanted them to build up themselves, to gain strength within themselves, to understand who he was. 1 John chapter 5, verse 4. And this is the story, this is the victory that conquers the world, our faith. This is the victory that conquers the world, our faith. It was faith in Jesus himself. He was the solid rock, their sure foundation. And they couldn't build on anything else other than Christ. They couldn't build on grandiose buildings or on religious organizations or church bodies or even on powerful armies. All those things would fail them. They had to build on Christ alone. And we too must build on Christ alone. We can't build even on our world as you see it, our consumer economy, if you will. A Middle East expert said that with roughly 3 good bombs, he could bring our whole economy here to a halt. He said, in the Straits of Hormuz, he'd blow up a nice big oil barge, and that would end all the oil from Iran and Saudi Arabia. Then he'd blow up a second boat in the Suez Canal, shut it down. And finally, he'd blow up the big pipeline across from Iraq over to the Mediterranean Sea. Yeah. And then he said our gasoline would zoom from $1 or $2 a gallon to $8 or $9 a gallon. Ooh, and we'd go into recession. And we don't know what's going to happen in France right now. Goodness. But all these doom and gloom assessments of our lifestyle meet up with the words of the gospel lesson today, where Jesus says, when you hear of wars, don't be alarmed. Nation will rise up against nation. There will be earthquakes, famines, birth pangs. So instead of believing the dire assessments about our future, instead of worrying about the actual birth pangs around the world, we must focus on Christ himself. And we must not live a life in which we're so fearful that we can't even move, we can't function. Again, look at the actions of Jesus himself. He did not flinch. He did not, shall we say, tremble before the Roman soldiers. He did not go back and run away from the Jewish authorities. He didn't even flinch when his own people rejected him. In our jargon, we could say, Jesus walked right into Dodge City. He sat down and ordered a drink. So we Christians are not worried whether the, let's say the government proclaims code yellow, code orange, code red, because our Homeland Security Advisory, that comes from heaven. That's where we get our Homeland Security Advisory. Did you hear what Hebrews said today in that second lesson? Hebrews said, since we have confidence to enter the sanctuary by the blood of Christ, let us approach with a true heart in full assurance of faith. So at our baptism, we were given our Homeland Security Advisory, and it's code white. We walk by faith in Jesus Christ. Verse 24 now of Hebrews, I think, gives us our word for this week, that which we put in our pocket and take home with us today. The writer said, let us consider how to provoke one another to love and good deeds. So don't live fearfully. Don't live like, I can't go farther, but rather doing good deeds for each other and doing good deeds for those in our world who are very much in need, some who are hungry and alone and homeless. So the word for today, let us consider how to provoke one another to good deeds and to love. Amen. We receive our offering.